Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to our very first session of MW Talks. Thank you so much for joining us from every market around the region. I believe we have well over 300 people joining us, which is a fantastic start to the session. So as you will have seen in our invitation, we have a very broad-ranging group of presenters with us today. Both Prasoon, our APAC chairman, and myself will be your hosts for the session, and then we have our leaders from across each of our markets who will be contributing to our roundtable discussions. The sessions are broken into three, and I will talk a little bit more about those shortly. But first off, I would like to say thank you to all of you that are joining us for all of the hard work that you have put in to keeping businesses going across the region, across disciplines, across markets over the last 3 months, 3+ months. I know that it's been a very difficult time. It's been a taxing period, especially with working from home for a lot of us and a lot of the markets. Not only are we dealing with a crisis, but often we're dealing with a crisis whilst working from home. So it's a new construct for a lot of us. I have been extremely impressed by how we've come together and we have supported each other and we have supported our clients. So I want to say thank you, and I hope that we continue to do that as we look to obviously come out of this crisis in as best possible shape as can be. We will shortly get started with our roundtable discussion, but before we do that, I would like to offer Prasoon a couple of moments to address our region. Prasoon, hi.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, and thank you everyone for making time for this. From wherever you are, I know all of us are going through tough times, and I can assure you that on behalf of Alex and me, have been talking to the worldwide management often, and we are all in the same boat, and we are all together in this. And Alex will definitely take you through various other nitty-gritties as we go along. And I just wanted to share, Alex, my observations around this time and a lot of learnings which probably one has had, during this time. I think there are questions which could be categorized into life learnings, society learnings, and probably what business realities are. I mean, if you look at in a broader, this is something which is unprecedented. Nobody had ever imagined we would live in times like these. And when initially when work from home, the lockdowns were announced, we probably reacted to them very, very instinctively, and we felt that this shall pass and it's not a long-term thing. But gradually the truth has started dawning upon us, and I think the questions of human relationships have come in front of you. Fundamental questions like to be able to spend time with yourself, with your family. What are we doing with the environment? What our relationship is with the environment, and think that from a hurry. Like I wrote an article a few days back in Times of India where I sort of talked about maybe this is the rebirth of nuance, that we felt that everything should be done in a hurry. We probably forgot to acknowledge a lot of things along the way. And I think this is probably a wake-up call to a lot of those things which we probably took for granted in society. We took for granted the essential services. We took for granted the medical services. I think a lot of things we took for granted have come to sort of as a question mark, because today we are expecting the whole infrastructure, the things around us, people around us to support us on a very altruistic, that they should be doing good because we should be. But have we been kind enough to the people who are, say, for example, vegetable vendors? Did we ever acknowledge Suddenly people have started understanding the importance of those people. I think these are the life questions in society. But coming to business, I think we have a lot to learn. One thing I have realized in our talks with various creative directors, strategy people around the world, that there is a dearth of ideas. I think even in the time of crisis, I can see ideas have not taken the back seat. Of course, there are practical problems of execution. How do we execute? But I think there's no dearth of ideas, Alex. I've not seen. You saw what we did with Dettol. We finally ended up producing a commercial which is on air without moving an inch, without anybody moving an inch from their homes, just in front of their screen, remotely directing, remotely doing music direction, editing, everything. So I think there's no dearth of ideas. The question is the morale. How do we, and there is a huge challenge in front of our HR and tech people, that how we keep the e-morale high. Now, e-morale is a very, very important thing. You know, like, can we introduce e-awards, e-HR? A lot of these things we'll have to probably examine today. Our clients, constantly I've been talking to all our clients, and one thing which is emerging is that people before profit. Every client talks about that we want to keep people before profit. And there is a balance we need to strike here. Let's not forget one thing. When the human being are most vulnerable, they register what you communicate with them more intensely. In a state of vulnerability, the message which is done to a consumer is going to have a very, very long lasting effect. They're going to remember when they were going through tough times, which brand talked what language. Was this brand very profiteering in their approach? Brand something which was cognizant of my state of mind, my mental state, my mental health. I think these messages have to be very, very carefully designed at this time, because they are not going to be here and now. These are going to have a longer lasting impact, and people will remember these. The sectors which you can see are declining. All of us, we know that, you know, aviation, travel, food, tourism, but there are a lot of silver linings here. A lot of commerce is reviving. E-learning is, homeschooling is. Now I heard about this immunity building sector, which is about, nutraceutical. Now this, we have to see all these opportunities and see how we can leverage these. And one more point I'll make before I finish is that in working from home, I've seen there are also silver linings there. Can work from home be a kind of a dual model? Can we adopt it as a future model where we can see a lot of women workforce, which because of practical reasons give up working? Possible that we can include them and can find an opportunity through this virtual connection. So I think finding solutions for our clients, also examining a lot of solutions. Since we have time today, I've been encouraging a lot of our creative directors to look at the solutions they're already given. Now, since they can't execute it, we had done it in a hurry or meet a deadline. Now there is a time probably to introspect and see maybe those solutions were not the best we could go at that time, but we have time today to examine and re-examine. So let's use this time constructively, and I hope that we will come out victorious from this. Let's keep our faith together. A lot of practical decisions will be taken. Alex is in the best place to tell you where and guide you where to go on those. But wherever you need any help from the management, we are all there together. Please remember that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prasoon. That's wonderful, and we would totally agree that out of crisis comes great opportunity and great learnings, and we need to make sure that we capitalize on that. I think you also said something very important about people before profit, and that is absolutely the position that not only IPG is taking, but McCann Well Group is taking as well. And I know all of you will have received the note from Michael at the end of last week, Michael Roth, IPG CEO, in regards to some measures that have to be taken within the organization. We will be following up with more details around that over the coming days, but It's imperative that you do understand that we are looking at people before profit, and we are looking at supporting people as much as possible. So with that, let's begin our first session. So our first session is entitled Learnings from the Front Line. What did you learn from the COVID-19 pandemic, and what advice can you give to other markets? And specifically, how are you safeguarding and rebuilding your business? So we have 5 presenters joining us for this. We have Connie Lowe from McCann Health in China. We have Bryce Whitwam from MRM in China, and we have Ronald Sun from McCann World Group in China. And then we also have SJ Kim, who runs our Korea operation, and we have Brandon Chung, who runs our Hong Kong operation. So to kick off, why don't we have Ronald give us some top-line lessons of what Ronald has learned from managing multiple offices and clients at the epicenter of the outbreak. And what, Ronald, are your goals for rebuilding the business in the weeks ahead? Over to you, Ronald.
Thank you, Alex. I think I will just pick a couple of points because I think China has been going through the pandemic at the very earliest stage. So pretty much like end of January, and then we have been engaged into this crisis. So 2 things that we learned from China perspective, like is first and foremost, is most important is the manage the expectation from our own people, and of course from the client as well, because everybody was very panicking in the very beginning stage. They don't know what to do, and especially our own people, some of them are not in town, traveling abroad, asking for support, everything. So I think help and connect with your HR department as frequent as possible. Try to support our people, help them to come back and in a safer way. So ensure that we have a safer environment, because in China, in the past 8 weeks, we have gone through different stages. Like we have start to work from home, and then we start rotation, and then flexi hours. So according to the government regulations, we have gone through different phases. So don't rush and don't hurry back to work, because one of the cases that's been spotted in China is one of the digital company. They asked their staff to come back in mid-February. So unfortunately, one of the staff got infected, and then the whole building got locked down. So don't rush for business sake. Make sure our people are safe. That's one thing. And then from the client perspective, I think some categories in China has been heavily impacted, like luxury goods, automobile. They are heavily impacted. So how we help our client, or how we manage their expectation, is everyone knows that social media and mobile is big thing in this region. So of course we cannot ask people to go to dealership showrooms, but what we have developed for the Cadillac client is a door-to-door service. So once the customer switch on their app, they can ask the Cadillac staff to come over, pick up the car to go for a service. Because during this period of time, there can be no sales transaction done, no test drive, no everything. So that's one way that we encourage our client Cadillac to keep the exposure of the brand, keep the brand preference for the Cadillac brand, so that we can pull it through the difficult time, and then make sure we are still on the shopping list when the pandemic is over. So something we can think about some of the clients that are not very successful during this period of time, but vice versa. Of course, some of the FMCG clients, they are more successful because e-commerce is big in China. So our L'Oreal client, they are very successful on selling stuff through online platform. So depends on the clientele you have in your country. I think I would advise that keep constant conversation to talk to them, see how we can build the brand awareness as we need to support them. Right. So that's the 2 things. And then speaking of new business, I think we are lucky enough in China that we still receive RFP. And then I think later on, Bryce will also share some of the way how we manage a pitch without getting people sitting together. So so far, I think we have win some business over the last 6 weeks. So lucky for us in China, and I think that's what we learned from these 8 weeks in China. And then I'll pass over to probably Bryce.
Thank you very much for that, Ronald. And actually, we'll go to Bryce in a second. But SJ Kim, our leader in Korea, is going to give us some perspectives on how the teams prepare for the shutdowns and how you ensure business continuity. Obviously, Korea is back up and running, but went through a very difficult period, 6+ weeks ago. So SJ, how did your teams suitably prepare?
Yes, thank you, Alex. Well, we'll start with our very intensive precaution measures at early stage. Yeah. Today is almost 3 months since COVID-19 outbreak in Korea, and immediately after COVID-19 outbreak, we moved very agile and has placed masks and hand wash sanitizers every corner and every floor of our office. And from the very first day, we put a very strict rule to wear masks in office. This was our very early stage rule. And nobody was allowed to enter the meeting room or office without masks. And if anyone has symptoms like fever, cough, then self-quarantine for 3 days, and reporting to top management was our mandatory. And thanks God, we had a few symptom bearers, but no confirmed cases so far. Another action was visitor control and visitor restrictions on our company building. So every delivery man, delivery service are not allowed to enter office except a few designated reception area. And another one was we also secured an exclusive elevator for our employee only. So now we moved very agile for these early stage precaution measures. And unlike other markets, we do lockdown. In Korea, COVID-19 spikes up in late February and early March, and entire American World Group employee conducted work from home drill during the first week of March, I think. And we set up multiple MS teams line by team and by business units. And we also set up emergency communication lines. Then after a few days drill, I think it was a 3-day drill, we came back to normal work from office. But we are still applying flexible work hours to avoid packed traffic hours. And yesterday number, well, I mark every day new confirmed cases on my whiteboard. Yesterday we had 25 cases, and the day before yesterday, 32. So, well, good news is the daily virus tally has dropped significantly to 2-digit numbers since early April. And as I said, it was 25 yesterday. And even there was only a few confirmed cases in Daegu and the Gyeongbuk province. Daegu Gyeongbuk is the initial epicenter of COVID-19 super spread in Korea, where cluster infection was reported due to religious gatherings. Mm-hmm. Well, situation is getting better. We often monitor Rex behaviors. A few advice, not a few advice. The advice is keep distance, wear mask, and stay positive. I can't believe we can, overcome this pandemic. We work together. And another one is, On the contrary to the e-learnings and e-meetings and e-production, well, people in Korea come to see the value of analog meetings and analog connections.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, e-learning, e-meeting, that's only temporary measure, and there's a contingency plan. But I think people put more values on the real connections.
That's very good. Thank you very much for that, SJ. And I think the importance of connections is critical. And you guys have gone through a lot in Korea. And frankly, the way that you have handled the crisis has been a great example for a lot of markets around the world, as well as China as well. So just to remind our audience that you can ask questions. So on the toolbar that you can bring up on your screen, there's a little Q&A icon at the end of it. You can pose questions and we will ask some of our presenters those questions at the end of each session. But let's keep going and let's move along to Brandon, who runs our Hong Kong office. Brandon, can you tell us a little bit about how you adapt and manage teams in this ever-changing situation? Because obviously we're moving from working from home to partial working from home, then back again to working from home. How do you handle that? And then consequently, how do you manage that with clients?
Sure. Hey everyone. So just for context, I think Hong Kong was quite similar to the pattern that China has followed. So we're technically in the second wave, or we're nearing the end of the second wave. So for most of February, we were kind of working from home. There was a short period in March where we tried to resume back to normal, but then as things started to heat up around the world, we've quickly gone back to work from home. So that's where we are in the journey in terms of the second wave. I think how we've managed it from the outset, and before we get into that, I would say one of the things we were extremely lucky to have in Hong Kong was a diverse executive committee, a committee that was helping us get differing points of views as we made that decision. So in Hong Kong, we had a China view from Connie, who looks after health, including Hong Kong. We had Nick giving a Singapore view, looking after MRM. And we also had Florence, who had historical context to what was happening in Hong Kong back in 2003. So we had a toolkit to work off of. And I think having those views together gave us confidence to make decisions from week to week as we were trying to manage through this situation. So I think while there was a little bit of luck in Hong Kong, I think it could be a really valuable learning for other markets as they prepare for this, to try and get those outside viewpoints so that you're not making decisions kind of from within the forest. In terms of how we actually communicated, I think our principle was, we don't know a lot about this, right? Despite having been through it in 2003, and we had a good kind of toolkit through the help of McCann Health around, we had to wear masks, we had to wash our hands, we had temperature checks in the buildings. Despite all that, I think we importantly said, we don't know what we don't know. So therefore, decisions we made were always on the side of caution, right? So we were like, if we don't know and we're not sure and we have a split decision, let's be cautious and work from home. And I think because of that, we took a decision to communicate on a weekly basis what the next week's plan would be, and we would never forecast further than that. And that allowed us to manage expectations with everybody to say, hey, next week might be different, but for this week, we're going to work from home. And next week, we might switch back. I mean, we're still following that model today. I think what I can say is between the first wave and the second wave, our confidence has gotten better, right? So in the second wave now, as we made that decision to roll back and work from home, we now know that our teams can work from home quite productively, and we flipped that switch quite quickly. So that definitely helped. And I think the final thing I'd share is just, we shared a very simple metric in our communications, which was the publicly available data in our local government, which was the daily case count or the weekly case count. And I think that helped everybody understand at least what management was looking at in terms of how we were making a decision, right? And even if by any chance we're getting it wrong, we were showing the data that we were looking at and how we were making that decision. And if there was a discussion to be had, we could have that objectively around the data.
Mm-hmm. That's very good. Thank you, Brandon. And I love those examples of people before profit again. And I think that's been consistent across our markets. So Connie Low, our head of McCann Health in China, is up next, and she's going to give us a unique view from the healthcare space, and particularly of interest, Connie, is how the team has been contributing from a healthcare perspective to the thought leadership for COVID-19, and what are the key insights for the healthcare clients in China?
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. Yeah, first of all, let's talk about how do we handle the COVID-19 outbreak. We believe very well that the only way to fight against this pandemic outbreak is to share our empathy and also to make sure we all stay stronger if we are together. So actually, the outbreak basically happened just before Chinese New Year, and I must thank the whole McCann World Group as a family and McCann Health around the globe. We were running out of masks as usual, everybody. So we were able to source a number of masks around the globe from Canada, UK, Europe, and Latin America. And secondly, we want to make sure our people get the relevant and timely information, some health education, like a proper hand hygiene, precaution to reduce the risk of infection, and also as well as how to wear masks properly. It's so difficult to get masks on, so better wear it correctly. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, we also believe it's very important to provide our point of view from because we are McCann Health with our expertise. So immediately our global medical director, Dan Grudici, jumped in, provide us a weekly update about this COVID-19 around the globe. And not only the curve, how it goes ups and down, also provide some rational advice, basically because it's sitting in the private panel of the United Nations and WHO. So that would give us actually very relevant information. In addition, there are news, as you know, social media, lots of query on the internet, may have questions, whatever. So then we invite the whole colleagues in Greater China offices to share their questions, concerns. And thank you also for the team in China, Ronald's team, helping to collect all those and consolidate that in return to produce the Mythbuster videos. So we produced 2 episodes. And then afterwards, now we extended that to the rest of the world. So I think these are very good information, and also to try to engage to our people, let them feel that we are all very much together with them. Then from business perspective, it's quite interesting to share with you. Although China is already very digital savvy, most of our pharma and healthcare clients, they still very much rely on the offline seminars, conferences as dominant communications. So one of our clients has shared with me saying that last year they conduct over 300 conferences, maybe to engage 300,000 doctors. Just in last 2 months, because they are quickly, they have to accelerate all the regulations, compliance, etc. Now we were able to conduct 2 new product launches online. Just on one live stream, we can get over 10 million doctors around China. So I think, yeah, this is the worst time, but at the same time also give us a lot of opportunity. We are seeing more and more social and digital platform will be moving along as a whole integrated platform for particularly in healthcare. Yeah.
That's very good. Thank you, Connie. There's some good insights into our clients' businesses, but also it was very impressive to see how the network mobilized around sending masks into China, and frankly, how China is now mobilized to send masks back out to the rest of the markets around the globe as they need them. So there's been a real support system that has proven out here. So next up we have Bryce, who runs our MRM business in China, and Bryce has actually been winning pitches with his team remotely over the last few weeks, which is very impressive. So Bryce, why don't you give us some highlights of your remote working experience and talk about the positive side of it?
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. Well, we've been winning some pitches, not all the pitches, but to be clarified. But yeah, as Ronald mentioned, we were early in the game in early February when we had to lock down, and we still had pitches that were looming from us from Chinese New Year, so we had to deliver on them really quickly. For the most part, we worked for the on a number of new pitch opportunities, and I have to say that I was extremely impressed about how well they did. And part of that was the fact that we were just more efficient on our timing. There were fewer distractions, fewer common meetings that we had during the time that we usually spent at the office. My creative team, I would say the creative team that didn't have small children, but those creatives who were single and had older kids said that they were more focused, they could get more work done. We pitched Nescafé, which we were asked to pitch a project for them against our rivals, and it was a multiple team of people that would normally take us at least probably a week and a half. But in this case, we had to deliver 24 hours. We had to deliver an idea for Nescafé, and we did an amazing job. We didn't win, but I can tell you that the client was extremely impressed. So I think some good lessons that you can learn here about doing pitches online. I'm sure that you're doing them now, but just from my experience about learn from my mistakes, basically. And the first one is obviously you still have to practice. I think it's ironic that we still think that we normally practice for a pitch, but in this case of pitching for online, we have to practice. I realized that was a mistake and we should have practiced, and the ones that we did do well, we're practicing a lot. It goes without saying that you have to test the technology. It will always seems to happen right in the middle of the pitch. Suddenly the screen. We made sure that every one of us had the presentation and made sure that we could pick up the slack in case it dropped off. We sent videos separately. We did a lot of mood videos, but they get herky-jerky on the screen, so we sent them. We definitely sent them separately to the clients. We practiced about passing the baton. That's a very important thing because obviously someone pushing the button means someone to go to the next slide and clicking the button to say next. And then obviously it goes without saying that we're still a people business. And the challenge for this was that we were not with the client. We couldn't understand the nuances. We couldn't see their faces. We couldn't see their expressions. Q&A session was tough. So we tried to create as much as personal as possible. We definitely kept the cameras on when people were presenting. We tried to engage in Q&A sessions off the time of the presentation. Anything that would try to help make up the slack. So overall, I think it's going to change how we do things. I think it's going to, in a good way, I think it's going to help us as agencies to become much more efficient. And I think that we don't necessarily, in the future, maybe we don't have to necessarily sit at the office the whole time, and we can different types of means and ways. So I think that there's positive to this as well. So that's kind of what we've gotten from the experience. Over to you, Alex.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Bryce. And actually, just following up on your last point, we've had a question from our audience about which of the emergency or unique measures that were deployed during the crisis do you think are going to become part of the norm moving forward? And I think you talked about it generally, but could you give us some maybe specific examples of what do you think will be part of the norm moving forward now?
Yeah, I think could be a part of the norm in a positive way is as I mentioned, do we all have to come to work at the same time? Can we have flexible hours? It will be a part of the norm that people will have that agencies, I know flexible working hours are common in North America, but not in Asia. Maybe in Asia we'll have flexible working hours that people can kind of come when they want, and we're judged mainly on the work that we complete, not in terms of how many hours we spend in the office. That's one thing I think. I think the second thing is that clients will become more accustomed to this way of communicating. We realize that, I don't know, in Shanghai or Beijing, we could spend at least an hour going to the client's meeting, an hour coming back to the office. It's an extremely wasteful way of doing business. What if we didn't have to do that? Call now, and that would be the norm, and that we don't have to necessarily waste our entire day of unproductivity, and we can just focus on the meeting with the clients and accept remote calls, and I think become much more the future. Two things.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful, and in fact I know several of our presenters who have to travel up to 2 hours each way in the morning and the evening, and of course, if you can use that time elsewhere, whether it's with family or with work, is hugely valuable. Just before we move on from this group, Brandon, would you add anything perspective on what some of the actions that could become part of the norm moving forward?
Yeah, I think my answer is similar to Bryce's. I think we are discovering the high levels of productivity at home, which I don't think any, and I think recalibrating when things do get back to normal will hopefully, so that we don't waste some of that time, whether it's in between meetings or coming to work or all that. I think we're going to find a much more efficient way of coming out of this. Sorry, it's not exciting. It's kind of echoing what Bryce said.
Well, it's good. It's good that there's consistency. All right, let's keep moving on. Thank you, Brandon, and thank you to the whole group in that first session. So session number 2, maintaining culture and connectivity. So what are the internal and external challenges, such as lockdown measures, that have affected daily life and office functioning? And we have Yupin, our CEO of Thailand, and we also have Raul Castro, our CEO of the Philippines. So Yupin, why don't you start us off? So you've done some tests for remote working before the full work from home mode. How was work from home? How has that impacted? And is there anything your people are doing to maintain connectivity and culture during this time? Some examples would be great.
Well, actually, we ran a test with just for your background, right? This is our 3rd week working from home. So at the very beginning, we ran a test actually just to make sure all the staff have all equipment needed and make sure that business goes on as usual. Then when it came to the 2nd week, I actually myself realized that the work is so efficient. And people just feel like, as you mentioned, Alex, that for some of us, given Bangkok traffic, when we don't have to really go through 2 hours to the office and 2 hours to the traffic, is kind of more efficient. But given that we hear a lot from our staff and also listen to ourselves and how we feel, we think like entering the 2nd week, work-wise, no problem at all, except, the soft side wise. So as a person, somehow, because our business is a people business, and we kind of like miss the interactions, and we miss talking to one another. We miss a lot of things that happen in the office. So right now, what we try to do, like last week, entering our 2nd week, we had this kind of activity within our close group Facebook to ask the staff to post their phone and stuff like that, and it did work well. Because I think like need to understand that people might are somewhere else, but still, because we know that everyone, although work is fine, they keep going every day, but they kind of feel quite stressful in a way, right? So we actually assign or discuss with our talent team and make it as a task is that each of them have to do a happiness check-in with each individually. So at least we have 3 talent team, and then each one of them has to make a call to maybe 10 staff per week to just make sure that we check them not about work at all, but how are you doing? Is there a support you need? How do you feel whatsoever? And also from the CEO call we had last week, I believe. So borrowing the idea from Nick from Singapore office. So tomorrow we're gonna try to do this, bring your own food or drink and have a chat among 5 staff to try it out, and maybe have a theme of you can dress whatever and do whatever you want and have a chat about how things go. So I feel like, the first week we kind of really focus on how the business will operate, right? But then as a human being, I myself too, we need some kind of another side of us. It's like work-life balance, but in a different way. So that's why we're doing this to connect people together and to try to check, the happy level, as I mentioned.
That's great, Yupin, and some fantastic examples there. And that question of happiness and maintaining good spirits during this period is critical, and the extent to which we can support each other and continue to provide that support to each other is essential. Yeah. So moving on to Raul, Raul, who runs our Philippines office. The Philippines has been in full lockdown for a few weeks now. And I'm curious, Raul, how you have maintained and your people have maintained connectivity throughout that period, and how you have kind of sustained the culture as well in the work from home environment.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, first, anybody into the Philippines will realize that we are very emotional people. When we're very happy, we're very, very happy. When we're sad, we're sad. So culture, as a matter of fact, is something that we've invested on very early on, because we think it's a strategy to get the best performance from our people. But because we are an emotional country, the thing that occupies our mind right now is the situation of the country. We have the highest number of infections in Southeast Asia. We have the second highest number of fatalities in Southeast Asia and the lowest number of recoveries. So the culture that we have in the office is not exactly something that occupies us while we're working from home. And let me start with the truth. Working from home, while it has its advantages, we're finding to be more difficult. Initially, it sounded like heaven because, no traffic, no need to dress up, no need to brush your teeth even to get started working. But after the first week, we found it more exhausting and more intense. Because when you're working from home, the culture that takes over is the culture of the home. And especially for our people, the average age in Macau, Philippines would be 28 years old. So a lot of our people are still living with their families as children, or for the other half as parents with children. And we are with our families is not exactly the person that we are with our coworkers. And many things make that so, especially now. The amount of space that we have at home is a factor. The rituals our families have. Filipinos we're a Catholic country. Easter was very big. Right? We are the type of culture that will have to eat breakfast together, eat lunch together, and eat dinner together. So the dynamics of the relationship we have in our families, all the way to the internet bandwidth that our families are willing to share with us, all of these will affect, right? So for the company culture to have a chance to survive while everyone's on remote, I echo what Bryce said earlier, we must organize for efficiency. And we have to organize with the values of our people in mind. And there are 4 that we follow. First, we organize common times. We'll have to agree when we start, when we take a break, when we go back, and when we end, right? There are, of course, exceptions when overtime is required, but by generally adhering to common times, we put some sense of predictability to our interactions. The second is we organize the communication channels that we use. There are many available, but sometimes it can be very confusing to be starting a conversation on one channel and then move to the next one while another one is on a different platform. So we've decided that MS Teams for specific projects, Exchange for emails to all, and SMS for one-on-one discussions, including sharing of jokes, memes, and TikTok. Third, we have to organize our groupings, unlike like we would in an actual office where space is laid out so that the groups are each other. We found it necessary to do the same when we go online. So there are groups for first level leaders, second level leaders, project groups, function groups, and discipline groups. And we found this very helpful to make us work faster and clearer. Last, we have to organize all our discussions, like face-to-face discussions where all our senses are engaged. Calls and chats are not as engaged. It's very difficult to focus and listen and understand and feel each other. And so we found it important to organize our thoughts and agree on the agenda of any discussion before any discussion. And while working from home, to wrap up, we found it it necessary to even be more organized, work better and faster. That way, we can devote more time and energy to the kind of culture required, not only by our business, but also by our country. And that's the kind of culture that we have embraced early on, but this time trying to exercise it for the rest of the country. A culture that embraces bravery, integrity, and generosity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Raul. Very, very well said, and actually, perfectly on point, because as you were giving us those tips on working from home, that was one of the questions that's come up a number of times, which is how do you balance the work and home life together? And I think you had a very nice point about how home culture takes over once you go home, and you're no longer in work culture, you're in home culture. So how do you balance the two? And I think you gave some good examples of how to handle that. Certainly from my perspective, and for some of the colleagues that we have worked with here in Singapore, identifying boundaries and making sure that those around you, your work colleagues, your family, understand what the boundaries are for when you're available, when you're not available, when you're available to work, when you're available to hang out with your children or look after your parent, whatever it is. Boundaries become critical, especially when work and home can merge a little too easily. So thank you very much for that, Raul. And actually, I will go to you with one of our second questions here for this session, which was, how did you find that you could help creatives work effectively in a remote environment? And any advice on remote brainstorming, Raul?
Well, like Bryce, we had an overnight pitch last week, and I think we did well, but I don't know yet if we're going to win it. But I think in that particular case, we had to, somebody's got to take the lead. Somebody's got to take the lead, and everybody has got to be aware of everything that's going on. It's a lot of help that McCann, World Group, IPG is sharing a lot. I mean, we've learned a lot from what Richard has been sharing and from what everybody else has been sharing. Sam and Jesse have helped a lot. And I think it's very important that you inspire the people before you get into a conversation. You almost like have to think, okay, we are looking for an idea that kind of approximates this direction. It's not like when you're working in the office and you can brainstorm and be wonderful over some things. No, it's got to be more efficient. It's got to be sharp. It's got to be faster. Definitely do not approximate the creativity juices that we have while we're working outside, where we have a lot of stimuli stimulating us. But I think it can be done, but with a sharper focus and a sharper way of achieving things.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Raul. All right, moving into session number 3, the new normal. Which tools, resources, and processes are working for you? And how can we get the basics right? So joining us is Tony Kunde, who heads up World Group in Japan, Eric Chang, who heads up World Group in Taiwan, and of course, Nick Handel, who heads up World Group here in Singapore. So let's start with you, Tony. So the Tokyo government has recently declared a state of emergency. What did you or your teams do to ensure you were prepared for this step? And which stakeholders needed to be informed? And what channels did you use to contact them?
Thanks very much, Alex. Hello, everybody. Well, actually, 2.5 months after the first case of the coronavirus was found in Japan, the Japanese government just last Thursday announced this kind of state of emergency. So just like the Formula One of the iceberg world, we've gradually gotten to the point we're at now. So we've had a little bit of time, and we made sure that we used that time first and foremost by making sure the infrastructure that are there. And if there's one thing I'm going to say to everybody, it's that your IT teams are going to become your everyday heroes. They are absolutely vital to making sure that everything you do is going to work smoothly. The other thing that was critical for us is to drill your teams on how to use Teams. I think it became something that we started using last year. Our office is very close to the Olympic Stadium, and therefore we started to train it a little bit and start using remote working as a process. But when now you're using it every day, really understanding the possibilities, whether it's chatting, whether it's using the video calls, etc., that became critical. And I think for me, if IT is one of the key things that you have to make sure is running exceptionally well, I think the second thing to understand is very quickly, as Raul just talked about, you're going to become very, very quick and very skillful about flicking between your teams. And one of the things I think we have to be careful of is we don't keep that internal. Okay, what the great things that McCann does in a normal time is also great when we're in a time of crisis. And I think this is just enabling us now to put that online. And you know, what we found is that taking some of the contents and the materials that we have as part of a network and offering those to our clients is also a really, really good opportunity. So Yoshi Matsura, who runs the planning team here in Tokyo, he put together a piece of research in Japan, and we matched that with the True Central research recently on COVID. And we're running webinars, and we call them True Stream. And we've invited clients to come along. We had 250 clients on the last call, and we got a lot of responses. Can I have the deck? Can you come in and talk to our leadership? Because one of the issues that we face is that looking at New York or looking from Western Europe, Japan is still, is it lockdown or is it not lockdown? And to give them the confidence and give them some numbers about how they should be approaching marketing and give them confidence in the market and their marketing activities, this kind of research was really great. So again, I think it's absolutely vital for us not to fall into the trap of being really confident about using this internally and then not allowing us to be able to externalize it. So your team skills and also your blue jeans, I think, is brilliant. Prasoon mentioned previously, you know, filming things at home and then putting them up rather than relying on the technology to work every time. I think that's a great idea. And my advice again is blue jeans. And if there's one last thing, you know, three things. One is IT, as I said. Number two is externalize what we do online, because we're still great when we're online as we are in person. And the last thing, and it goes back to what Prasoon said at the start, is, you know, our relationships with our clients is on a very human level. And we used to be oftentimes the best part of their day. And I think we just need to make sure that we're always kind of offering them opportunities to chat with us and to make the best usage of the learnings from around the world.
That's great, Tony. Thank you. And the point about the use of Teams and the increased use, as evidenced by this session, has been very impressive. And I think there will be a huge amount of comfort using Teams moving forward, as opposed to previously. And of course, a very good point about our clients as well, and staying connected to them. As much as we need to stay connected to our people, frankly, a lot of our clients are at home looking for connections as well. So that's a very good point. So let's move on to Eric in Taiwan. So Taiwan is interesting because it's one of the few markets where the office is still open, and actually the office never even closed down. So what are you doing, Eric, in terms of prepping in case the situation changes, which of course we hope it doesn't? And have you noticed any changes from the multinational clients in terms of how they're engaging or doing business?
Yes, I think we are lucky. I think at this moment we still working in the office. I think it's contribute our citizen and the government. They are proactive to prevent this happens. Until now, we still working in the office, and as we know, the multinational company, some of them they already closed the office and they work from home, but some still working in the office. However, if your business was impacted by the virus, but your consumption is overseas, there will be impact very serious. However, your customers is in the Taiwan island-wide, it will not be impacted too much unless you are doing the travel agency, you are the travel and tourist the business, you are the department store, you are the big retailers. However, if your business related with e-commerce or anything business related with e-commerce, then you have the business opportunity happen in the market, because the home delivery became very, very popular. People can go out, but people don't want to eat outside, or people don't want to go have an event outside. So they will do any kinds of activities at home or in the office as well. So FMCG, hygiene products, or cosmetics, or skincare products, all the kinds of product you can think of can be sold in the digital. There will be opportunities happening in the market. So that's why we encounter to our clients. We try to do our best to propose the proposal to try to move the budget from the offline to the online. No matter what kinds of product, you can push your clients to move budget from offline to the online campaign, or the use of social campaign, or use the e-commerce to establish your brand awareness in the online. So far, the multinational company, if you have the travel business outside, then you'll be impacted. But for the local consumptions, still exist in the market.
That's very good. Thank you, Eric. Very insightful. So moving on to our final speaker of the day, Nick Handel out of our Singapore office. So Nick, which tools, we may have some of the answers here, but I'm curious to see how you build. Which tools and resources are proving most effective during Singapore's shutdown? Are you using platforms for internal and external stakeholders? And what are your tips as a leader for ensuring everyone remains connected during this time? Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. So it's a bit of a scene setter for maybe those who aren't aware as to the context of Singapore at the moment. We've been working from home for 3 weeks now, so we're coming into our 4th week, and we know another 3 weeks to go. So from a Singapore government perspective, we have a thing called a circuit breaker, which is going to be with us until the 4th of May. So we know that we're pretty much halfway through at the moment. So still plenty of things to learn and plenty of things that we can learn from. In terms of tools, I think a lot of people have said it already. I mean, we talk about our tools as probably the WTO of tools, so the WhatsApp, Teams, and Outlook. Teams is clearly, I think, the linchpin. We're big Microsoft users in Singapore. It's one of our biggest clients, so we're big fans. And we kind of use the 3 things for different purposes. So WhatsApp is, for informal nudges, for meeting chasers, for a little sort of inter-office banter and sharing the latest meme. Teams is our sort of less formal, device for sort of group check-ins, of course, and brainstorming. And then Outlook, I think is really just reserved for me these days. I think it's for the older generation, for the formal follow-up and agreed actions. But we're using the 3 tools in sort of different circumstances, and collectively seem to sort of work. In terms of resources, I think one of the things we sort of notice is that there's no shortage of research or of insight or point of views during the sort of the COVID situation. So I think the solutions room has been a fabulous resource to aggregate, all of that third party as well as our own proprietary sort of research in one place. Particular sort of favorites there would be, I think, the emotions of the pandemic, which was a framework for understanding the life cycle of a pandemic. GWI, as always, is great to hear the latest trends in sort of behavior or media consumption. And for those who might not have seen it, actually there's a nice piece of work being done every week by MRM called the Relationships in the Time of Social Distancing. It's a little bit lighter, but very human and sort of relatable insights in terms of how people are reacting to COVID around the world. Are using some different platforms, internal and external stakeholders? I seem to have a lot of IT questions. Yes, I mean, actually our clients and ourselves are using sometimes a little bit different platforms. From our perspective, as I mentioned, it's the WTO. For clients, every client has their own sort of picadillo. They're using slightly different things. A lot of them are using Teams, but also using Skype. I don't know why, it's just an inferior version of Teams as far as I can see. Blue Jeans and Zoom are also sort of favorite. Each has, I guess, something a little bit different. We do think that Blue Jeans and Zoom might be a little bit better for showing sort of video quality, perhaps, than Teams. But there's much of a muchness. And of course, Zoom, we have a lot of sort of security issues with as well. But we will use essentially whatever the client uses. and we're normally pretty good. Although a catchphrase of "I'm sorry, my microphone was on mute" has been heard quite a bit. And then the third question you asked me was about tips for ensuring everyone stays connected. So I might share with you what we're doing in Singapore in terms of how we're staying connected, but also some more generic sort of tips, I think, on how to do that. So in terms of what we're doing, I think there's 5 things that we're doing. So in terms of sort of work connections, you know, the day-to-day, the general sort of business as usual. Of course, it's nothing like business as usual. Is the daily virtual stand-ups. So most of my teams meet as a kind of a creative or an account team on a daily basis. They go through the tasks and check in on sort of general well-being every day. Most of my reports have twice weekly meetings with their line managers. Again, a little bit sort of deeper dive in terms of well-being, also sort of managing workload. You know, some of those little sort of signals that you get in the office you can't quite see as much. Such as somebody throwing pens around or whatever it may be, you don't quite know how everyone's doing, so these sort of check-ins are vital. And another thing that we're doing more from a business perspective is sort of weekly business and resource planning updates. So we used to do these sort of monthly, where I would sort of periodically go to every sort of business account group lead, and we'd look at the sort of the business that's been and the business that's coming up in terms of sort of financial forecasting. Well, things are changing so fast at the moment that actually we're doing this weekly. So we're actually reviewing, you know, potential softness on clients, potential upside on clients, and talking about sort of moving staff around so that we go and chase the business that's doing best. And that sort of sense of nimbleness, I think, has been one of the most remarkable things of COVID-19. You know, we used to have much more defined sort of teams working on clearly defined clients. And everything's become a little bit more sort of gig economy now, that we're moving to where the need is most. 2 social things that we do. So glad to hear that UPIN's using the Friday at 5. So we have our weekly all staff socials. So every Friday at 5 o'clock, 5 people chosen at random take 5 minutes each to talk on some of the reflections of the week. It's supposed to be a very light-hearted sort of review of what's been going on in their lives. And it's compulsory, as Yupin mentioned, to come to that with your favorite drink or food item. Our HR team have also put together a lovely thing on a daily basis. Another means of sort of connecting us all. It's called Challenge of the Day. So Shah and Romani set a challenge for the office every day. You know, go to sleep at 9 o'clock. You know, DIY your favorite Taobao or takeout. Make your own muesli, and you're supposed to post photos of you doing exactly that into our Teams page. And then I guess sort of generally speaking, sort of 2 tips I'd offer in terms of how best to stay connected. I think tip number 1 from a work perspective is keep work discussions and, you know, action points clear, concise, and curt. You know, managers can't really look over the shoulder of people as well as they can do. The tasks and expectations have to be communicated with ruthless clarity and brevity. There is a sea of noise happening in everyone's room at the moment, and we need to keep, you know, our business communications as concise and clear as possible. So that's on the one side. On the flip side of this is we're finding that you have to over communicate on the personal stuff, on the human stuff. That we need to encourage, you know, the light and the social conversations on Teams or WhatsApp. Ensure the video is turned on as much as possible, despite the fact that many of our teams sometimes don't enjoy that. It's great to get that face-to-face contact. And I think maintain the frequency. You know, this is what one of my team actually sort of mentioned in a meeting we had this morning. You know, in an office environment, if something sort of crosses your mind, you have corridor conversations. You know, you just normally reach across the desk and sort of you'd mention it to a colleague. I think we think that sometimes we have to have much more formal meetings in a virtual environment, and I think I would encourage everyone to continue with those corridor conversations, to jot it down on Teams, to send us sort of a text, for instance, on WhatsApp, but to try and continue to do the same, you know, now as much as you have been in the past.
That's great. Thank you very much, Nick. And I think that's a great point about keeping those corridor conversations alive within the virtual remote world, because we can get very quickly into a place where you're only communicating about work, but you're not providing any of that emotional support and camaraderie that you get in the office. So thank you for that. So we've had a few very good questions coming in at the end here. I know that we're running a little bit late, but we'll answer a couple of these questions, and then of course we can follow up. We will look at all of these questions and perhaps send some responses to you if it seems fitting. So a very good question was, as leaders of our region, what is the first thing that you foresee will change in our industry, and what are the business implications from this change? And I'll answer that quickly myself, and then I'll get somebody else to give an opinion. So what I think is going to become very apparent, or has become apparent, is a greater sensitivity and empathy for the work from home model. I think prior to COVID, I would say there's a fair amount of prejudice about working from home, and as much as people would like to say they were open to working from home, I think that a number of individuals didn't actually consider working from home to be as taxing or potentially as capable of delivering quality results as doing so in the office. And I think certainly I know that the panel would agree with this, and I'm pretty sure most of you in the audience would agree that working from home is very, very hard. And in fact, there's a whole host of other issues that you have to balance. And certainly from a personal perspective, I have a newfound respect for those that work from home, and understand really how tricky it is to balance the two parts of your life at the same time. So I'm going to ask that question also to Yupin. So Yupin, as leaders of our region, what's the first thing that you foresee will change in our industry, and what are the business implications of that change? Yupin?
Yeah, I think because for me, right, what I can see already, the change that happened is the way you keep connecting to the client. Because right now, right, before this work from home happening, I myself try to schedule a meeting and have a face-to-face chat over a cup of coffee with a client, like L'Oreal or Nestle, or a key client. So I feel like right now we tend to talk a little more. So basically a week or every bi-weekly conversation on the phone. So that we actually keep more connected. Secondly, this is just a crazy idea, because I was thinking of working mobile or remotely. People got used to it, right? Like last 2 weeks, I was the judge of APAC FE round 2, which means you need to have a kind of a face-to-face conversation with all the judges, for example. So after that, we kind of all agree that next year maybe we don't even need to fly in Singapore and have that kind of meeting anymore. So the change in terms of the way of working is totally changed. Things will go online more. Today we talk a bit about the stuff as well, that we became basically paperless operation, because nothing got printed, and reimbursement form whatever became on electronic digital side, authorized, and also no printing out paper, which to Thailand is a difficult thing to happen for government sector, for example, because everything got filed as paper, right? But we feel good that, as Anthony said, IT is our hero. So we have a very good IT system, very good resources that help us going through in terms of the typical business process, like how we deal with reimbursement, how we keep connected to the client. And just another idea is, I think that might change also is the office space. Because, for example, now we learn that by working from home, we don't have to, I myself don't have to spend 4 hours on the road to go through the traffic. So I can start working sharp at 9 a.m. So maybe I'm thinking we can have the space that mobile, and maybe we don't fix desk for everyone anymore, maybe in the future, because not all of us will need a desk that fixed and everyone can go through, and then maybe we'll need a little less space for the office, but more meeting room, for example. So there's a lot of change in mindset and the way we behave when it comes to business these days. Sure.
Okay, Alex, I just add to Prasoon here. To your point of working from home is the biggest challenge for sure. I think from the client's perspective, I can tell you what I have experienced in last month is that I think it requires a lot of proactive solution providing. See, clients might not be able to see an opportunity. And I think self-motivation is something which we'll have to all exercise, especially the leaders, because we are used to a client brief all the time. We're used to somebody charting our path and sort of chalking out what we are going to do in the whole day. I think for leaders, it's very important to wake up in the morning and look at your client's problems and see, is there any innovative way proactively I can go to the client and suggest? Because a lot of projects which were usual projects might be on hold. And it's probably for our business, the companies which will survive are the companies which will be able to provide proactive solutions and will have to exercise self-motivation.
That's very good, Prasoon. And actually, I would ask you one question, which is how would you suggest and recommend that our people balance that idea of business building and being proactive with obviously the sensitivities around COVID and not coming off opportunistic?
Yeah, this is a very tricky question, Alex. It depends on the category you are in. If you are in a healthcare category, there are chances that you will be seen less profiteering. But suppose you are not seen, a lot of people are saying that today what the world is making you realize is what are the things you need and what are the things you can do away with. Now, a lot of these, messaging which is going through. So you'll have to see which category you are operating in. If your category is non-essential category, and if you feel that there you will be looking like profiteering or looking like opportunistic, you'll have to be really careful in your messaging. But if your messaging is very much linked with life and an everyday need, I think you can take more liberties there. So I think it would be left to the intelligence of the leader and the strategists and the creative directors to make sure that they do not tilt that balance.
Yeah, very well said. Well, thank you very much. We are going to wrap up, but I have just two questions that I want to answer, and then I will thank our guests and our presenters. So the first question was around award entries and whether or not we would be entering award shows this year. And the answer is that we will not be entering the award shows for the remainder of 2020. And whilst we do consider the award shows very important, they fall into a bucket that I would call discretionary spending. And during a period like this, it's important that we cut back on our discretionary spending so that we can focus all of our efforts on retaining our employees. And going all the way back to what Prasoon said at the beginning of this call, it's about people over profit. And if we can use some of our discretionary budgets to ensure that we keep as many people within the organization as possible, then that is a success for us. And we'll just have to go into the awards next year. And then the last question was in regards to production, and are we capable of doing any production at all? And what are the protocols? So again, as you will have heard from Prasoon's example with Dettol at the beginning, there are some fantastic examples of productions that have taken place across markets, just being shot at home or using any manner of innovative means. But we actually have a set of guidelines that Melissa, who runs our craft operation for APAC, have put together, and we will send those out to the region so that everybody understands what our craft guidelines are for production and protocols in this environment. So with that being said, I just want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank Prasoon, Yupin, Raul, Tony, Eric, Nick, Connie, Bryce, Ronald, SJ, Brandon, and then, of course, the regional team, Jess, Perrine, and Sam, who helped put on this wonderful first inaugural MW Talks. Thank you all, everybody. Have a safe and sound rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone there.
Thank you.